Israel has carried out its largest hostage rescue operation since the war began. On Saturday, the Israeli military rescued 4 hostages during a raid in central Gaza. All 4 are reported to be in good medical condition. These are the scenes inside a hospital as the newly released hostages reunited with their families. It's the first successful rescue mission by Israeli forces since February, and there are reports that the U.S. provided intelligence that helped with that mission. Hamas says, though, at least 200 Palestinians were killed and more than 400 injured in the raid that freed the hostages. Hamas is also saying this morning that 3 other Israeli hostages were killed, but it hasn't provided any evidence of that. So what could these developments mean for ceasefire talks? And will the hostage rescue affect Prime Minister Netanyahu's support domestically? Earlier this morning, I spoke to an advisor to former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. Nimrod Novik, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I want to start with the IDF operation that rescued 4 hostages kidnapped by Hamas. It's the most successful rescue of hostages since the war started. The last attempt to rescue hostages, I believe, was in February. And I wonder what you think that means for Benjamin Netanyahu politically, the fact that there was this moment of success for the Israeli people and for the hostages.
Well, short term, there's no doubt that it gives him a boost. It is much to his credit that he took the awesome risk of approving the operation, a very complicated, daring operation. So short term, it's a boost. Longer term, I'm talking about weeks in this country is long term. It basically changes very little.
And the fact that Hamas says, and it certainly looks like it from the images, that hundreds of Palestinians were killed during the raid. To be clear, we don't know who were civilians and who were militants. It was certainly a little bit of both. I wonder what that means for ceasefire negotiations, because it was, as you say, a very intense and risky operation.
Well, you know, since October 7th, we've been humbled in terms of our ability to understand what drives the Hamas leadership, particularly those who are in the tunnels in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar and others. So theoretically, it can work both ways. It can demonstrate to them that Israel has greater capabilities than they had assumed. Yeah. It can harden their positions. It can make them more careful in hiding the other 120 hostages. So it can work both ways over there.
So you wouldn't think that it would lead to either an agreement that things need to end and the other hostages should be released, or that they might become more entrenched in their position? Hard to say is what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah, but you know, as an Israeli, I'm focused first and foremost on my government and my prime minister, hoping that they stick with the plan that they basically initiated. It was outed by President Biden, but it was an Israeli plan. And we've seen the prime minister zigging and zagging around it, given his political constraints and considerations. So first and foremost, I want to make sure that my government goes for it.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to wait to see whether the mediators, Egypt and Qatar, are able to apply enough pressure on Hamas to make them accept the framework.
Just to go back to what's happening domestically, Benny Gantz was supposed to make an announcement. He's a member of the War Cabinet. Was supposed to make an announcement yesterday. Now it has been switched to today. And he had said, if certain things don't happen, I'm ready to leave the War Cabinet and leave this emergency government. What impact would it have on Netanyahu if that goes ahead, if that happens today?
If Benny Gantz and General Eisenkot both leave the War Cabinet, this will indicate to the Israeli public what some of us, have known for a long time, and that is 2 things. One, that the purposeful phase of the war is over, and we are now stuck with very little objectives to be accomplished by staying there, and therefore should go for that framework that possibly will lead to the end of the war. And two, it will signal to the Israeli public that it is legitimate to go to the streets and demand an end to the war and the return of all hostages, which can only be accomplished by a deal.
Secretary Blinken is back in the Middle East this week. He's going to Israel, Egypt, Qatar, other places to talk about this deal. At this stage, how much influence do you think the U.S. has? As you say, it was Biden that sort of announced or outed that Israeli plan, but how much is the U.S. able to influence either side here?
I think that what we witness is a two-pronged American approach to this. On the one hand, there is the political assumption, if not conclusion, that nothing good is going to happen while our coalition is the way it is, with the most extreme elements holding the fate of the coalition and the Prime Minister repeatedly heeding to their pressures. And that's where outing the plan probably was intended, is to tell Israelis what we had not known because it was kept secret. And it was even hidden from member of the broader cabinet, as distinguished from the narrow war cabinet, in order for the lunatics in the government not to be aware how far that plan was going to go. So one was political to affect the domestic dynamics here, and the other one is professional, where both head of CIA, Bill Burns, and others are coming to the region trying to make it happen on the professional layer. Whether both will accomplish the objective is too early to tell.
Can you give me a sense of how people, obviously it's not a monolith, but how Israel is dealing with things right now? The fact that this has gone on for so long, and to your point, we don't know what the end is, and no one's really clear whether Prime Minister Netanyahu has a plan that he's willing to implement anyway. So what is sort of the mood in the country?
Well, there is a substantial disconnect between how the world sees what's going on in Gaza and what we Israelis do. I don't have to tell you what the world sees, you know it better than I do. But we Israelis don't see what you see, because Israeli media is self-censoring, whether it because of patriotic considerations or because of ratings, I don't know. But we Israelis don't see it. On the other hand, mentally, we are not in the 8th months of the war. Mentally, we are in the first week. Israelis are flooded with stories, heroic stories and tragic stories of the first week. And the heroic story of yesterday does not overshadow any of that. However, whereas the early weeks saw Israeli public react with a combination of trauma, pain, grieving, and anger, I believe that over the past weeks, we see more sober appreciation of the futile nature of continuing the military campaign to no end. And therefore, we see in poll after poll a majority of Israelis supportive of the plan as presented by President Biden.
Nimrod Novik, thank you for making the time for us today. Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for having me.